You know, Heather started us off this morning with some really inspirational stories about how she was using digital and social media. And I want to come back and bring that a bit full circle and talk about how one of the best uses of those tools is to make your town, your neighborhood, a better place to live. It's also appropriate that I understand there's some pizza after this. I'm the only one standing between you and that pizza. And that's important because I'm going to ask you a question that's critical to anybody who closely studies the local information and media business. And that is show of hands, who here likes pizza? Okay, I know that seems like a strange question, but if you've studied and worked in the local industry as long as I have, you know that any serious theoretical discussion of what you do in local is always centered around pizza. Does it help me find the local pizza joint? Will it work at the local pizza joint? Will it sell pizzas at the local pizza joint? Pizza, you see, is the atomic particle of local. So pretty much everybody likes pizza. I want to get a little bit more specific. Urban Crust Pizza is right across the street. Who here likes Urban Crust Pizza? Okay, over here, this group over here, you are the holy grail of local. Because you're a community. You have interests in common. You like Urban Crust Pizza. And at least right now in this moment, you're neighbors. Okay? Interest plus location makes community. Interest plus location creates actions. Interest plus location means change. Interest plus location sells pizzas. Now, this is a TED Talk, so you know I'm not here to sell you pizza, but I am here to sell you on an idea. And that idea is that this device and the networks that are connected to it, that were designed to make the world smaller, are best used to make your neighborhood bigger. Now, I've been obsessed with this concept for as long as there's been an online. And I and the people in the companies I've worked at have been kind of on the bleeding edge of some of this stuff for a very long time. But I've got some good news for you. And that's that the future is almost here as far as these devices go. But to understand the future, we need to look a little bit at the past. For most of human history, the easiest, really only information you could get was local information. If you think about it, cave walls and town criers and small printing presses are really best geared towards delivering local information. But in the late 19th century and the 20th century, the game completely changed. We had mass media, and with TV and radio, and to a lesser degree newspapers, suddenly it was much more efficient, much more economically feasible to tell millions and millions of people what was happening in Washington instead of telling those millions and millions of people what was happening in thousands and thousands of local meetings. And that's a shame, because as much fun as it is to hear political pundits scream at each other on TV, and as much as we might be interested in the goings-on of the lives of Hollywood celebrities, nothing really impacts our life like what happens right around us. Yeah, we're in the digital commerce age, but still, all of us spend almost 90% of our money within 30 miles of where we live. Depending on whose statistics you believe, local businesses contribute back between 58 and 100% more money into the local economy than chain businesses do. And local government impacts you far more than national. Think about your property taxes, the schools, safety, your speed limit on the way to work. These things all touch you every single day. The paradox here is that the level of government that most directly impacts your life is the one that you're least likely to understand or really have good awareness of. And that's frustrating because you would think in 2014 we would have better, richer local information. Why don't we? There's something that economists call the last mile problem. And what's used originally to describe telecom and cable and internet, and the fact that it's very efficient and cost-effective to drive a big pipeline, a network, into the city of Plano, for instance. But it's very costly to reach each of those houses that are outside that pipe. Same is true of information. When you think about it, when you're talking about local information, you're talking about lots of tiny little communities all over the place, and you've also got the problem that those tiny little communities all over the place, whether you're talking about media or government, don't do anything the same. You're looking at a Tower of Babel. That's where this device and the networks come in. As we're now starting to look at nearly 100% access and interoperability from these devices, the game is about to change. Now, there are three key ways that we can take action now and accelerate that change, or three key areas. They're government, commerce, and community. I'm going to start with government. In 2006, I had a local news startup called Pegasus News, and we had the only database of its kind in the country that covered campaign contributions to every local politician who had run for office or been elected to office. 8 counties of information on donors, candidates, offices, all cross-referenced in a database. Now, like some of our friends earlier today, we were failing forward, and it wasn't sustainable. But I look back 8 years later and look at the technology and ask how in the world this can't have been figured out. Now, I mean, at the national level, there's a lot of talk about this Data Act that's about to be passed that's going to bring a lot more federal information out online and make it a lot easier to search. And we're lucky here in Texas, we've got an institution like the Texas Tribune that's doing a great job statewide. But what can we do to make sure that there's local information? In some ways, we're better off than some communities. If you go online, the information is there, but it's in mountains of PDF files. It's not searchable, it's not linkable, it's really not usable. So how can we get our local governments to do more than check the box and create something that's actually useful? When we had this database, we saw elections results change because of conversation and action around the data in it. We saw court cases that were decided differently. Here's one way you could get involved. This summer, North Texas is going to be hosting the Southwest's first ever Civic Apps competition. And there's going to be prizes and ongoing business mentorship for folks who make apps that are focused on, and these are mobile apps, focused on recycling, conservation, and government transparency issues. I'm sure there's a lot of people from tech companies here in the room. Are you going to encourage your developers to enter that contest? If you're a business person, are you going to help the winners with some mentorship in order to make sure that these things continue to propagate? Now look, I know that government data isn't as sexy as Yelp reviews online. But if you think it doesn't matter, look at the institutions touched by governing bodies. And just as one example, look at Toyota selecting Plano as its headquarters and largely citing the quality of schools as a reason, when they could have chosen many other urban centers. That's directly impacted by government. Or look at it another way. If voting and engagement is a sign of healthy government, and we trust so much of our personal and financial information to these devices, why not our vote? What would the voting rate be if everybody could vote on their mobile phone? Second issue I want to look at is commerce, and specifically kind of where it touches local marketing. So there have been lots of attempts over the years of national businesses trying to deliver news and advertising into communities, and they've almost universally failed. A very recent one was AOL had a business called Patch that was a news and advertising site. And it failed miserably because of another paradox of local. Solutions that are built at the local level may tend to work very well, but they don't often scale. To go back to my example of Pegasus News, we had this hyperlocal targeting engine for advertising where I could tell on a specific day within a 2-mile radius who the bluegrass music fans were on the day of a concert in this venue with unsold tickets. The problem is that only worked on our little site. The flip side, you take something like AOL's Patch, they go out and they're trying to serve nationally, and they run into the same problem from our mass media example earlier. They can't deliver enough unique content economically into a local area to serve that last mile. The problem is if you don't serve the last mile, they're not going to do business with you. Take another area, mobile apps. Every company, every big company out there, from Wal-Mart to Starbucks to Frito-Lay to JCPenney, has a mobile app. Now, I don't know that I need an app to find my local Walmart, but how can we use that to help local businesses? Back in 2010, Apple launched a product called iAds that was about delivering mobile ads from big brands to these devices, and it was a failure. But the day it launched, I emailed Steve Jobs, and I started a conversation with him in which I suggested that they ditch the big business model and instead leverage all of our credit card numbers, millions of them that they have in iTunes, to make it as easy for me to buy pizza at the neighborhood pizza joint as it is to buy a copy of Angry Birds or the latest Black Eyed Peas single. Surprisingly, Steve Jobs did reply, and we had a little conversation, though he didn't take me up on my plan or offer me the job I was fishing for. But just last month, it was announced that Apple is launching a division to do exactly that thing. In the meantime, what can we do to help our local businesses using these devices? One's very simple, is when you're on Facebook, if you use Foursquare, review and provide information on local businesses. It's very easy for the big commodity businesses to have a lot of information out there that drowns them out. We can provide the information that brings people into local businesses. If you're a local business, leverage some of the white label apps that are out there that allow you to offer reward programs and discount programs like the big boys have in order to compete. Or, Andre brought up earlier his app, Tango Tab. That's a great example of a way that local restaurants can leverage the kind of technology that Starbucks is using to take payments from us. If you don't think local advertising in mobile is a big deal, I saw some new statistics last week. Mary Meeker's considered the top media industry analyst out there, and she looked at all of our media and how much attention we were paying to it as users and how much advertising it had. And every single media, print, billboards, TV, the spend on advertising far exceeded the attention we were paying, except for one, these devices. And there was a $30 billion gap between the attention we all pay all day long, probably some of us while driving, and the advertising that's on here. And you can be sure that that advertising is best served using the GPS in this device and helping drive local business. Finally, there's community. I live in a, let's call it a transitional neighborhood. And much effort has been put behind trying to drive out crime and seed business. Even over the course of the 11 years I've lived there, there's been a weed and seed, a federal weed and seed program staffed by dozens of active volunteers. But nothing has driven community in my neighborhood more than a simple app called Nextdoor. It's really just a message board that works nicely as an app. The little twist, you have to live in a geographic community to use it there. You have to prove you live there under your real name using an analog mechanism. I'm very skeptical of things like that working without somebody to seed them or to moderate them, but I've been amazed to see in my neighborhood crimes getting stopped, lost dogs getting found, micro-libraries getting built. There are things called micro-libraries. I learned that this year. Just last week, my wife and I bought some mosaic art from an artist based on the recommendation of one of our neighbors. The fact is, I've met more people in my neighborhood using that app over the last year than I have in the prior 10. Now, one of the reasons that this is so critical is because there's a high time cost and there's a high risk in reaching out to a stranger. This group, this community that didn't self-organize over here earlier, isn't necessarily going to do so without some help. But the simplest action you can take while you're out there playing Candy Crush and doing all the other things you do on your phone is like and follow and engage with your local neighbors and your local businesses. Maybe that extends into a real-world trip to the pizza parlor. But regardless, testing the waters in this very safe, low-impact way is going to bridge your way to amazing real-world interactions that will change your life. Thank you.